Good afternoon, everyone. Although I think there's a few people making their way through the lunch line, we're going to go ahead and get started so we can make the most of our time here today. My name is Lisa Herbert. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations for Usabelli Coal Mine, and I'm also a longtime supporter of the Chamber, having served as the President and CEO for a number of years, and then now I'm also on the Board of Directors. I'm a member of the Government Relations Committee and then also the Military Affairs Committee. So thank you all for supporting the Chamber and for being here today. We have the political forum for candidates running for the Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly. So before we get started, if everyone could just silence their cell phones. And as we do each week, I'd like to thank our executive partners whose logos you saw on the screen up here. And these businesses are really the backbone of the businesses in the community. They're a pillar of strength for the Fairbanks Chamber. And a full list of those executive partners can be found on the Chamber's website. Do we have the Chamber pot? Everybody wants the money. But before we do that, let's do if you guys would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and for our big split the pot today, it's $13. So you can probably go and visit one of our chamber member businesses and get a really awesome latte or two. So the winning number is 9125. 9125. Yay! So before we get started, I'd like to thank all the candidates here today for your willingness to serve in public office and for the work you will do on behalf of the residents and businesses in the Fairbanks area. I encourage the audience to engage with those candidates outside of the forum to learn more about them, their philosophy, and their vision for our community. As I introduce you, would you just give us a wave so folks that can't see your name tags in the back know who you are? The Borough Assembly candidates from your left to right running for Assembly Seat A, we welcome Kevin McKinley and David Guttenberg. Assembly Seat F, we have Patricia Silva and Savannah Fletcher. And lastly, running for Assembly Seat G, please welcome Lance Roberts and Kristan Kelly. The Fairbanks Chamber is a nonpartisan organization which advocates for the conditions that will allow businesses of all size to prosper in our region. We're focused on the betterment of our members by working with all levels of local, state, and federal government officials. It's our goal with our political forum series is to help you in the audience understand your choices during this fall's election cycle, and the candidates here today will appear on the ballot for the October 5th municipal election. So a sincere thanks to our political forum series sponsors. Those include Stewart Title Company Yukon Division, Doyon Limited, McKinley Bank, Mac Federal Credit Union, and Hedgecock Realty Group. These organizations support informed voting and encourage you to engage with the important issues facing our state and our community. So thank you for joining us today, and with that, we are going to get started. A quick review of our format. The candidates will be asked a series of questions that are short answer or yes or no. We've allotted some time for audience questions at the end, so if you in the audience have a question, please fill out one of the question cards. You'll see them on all of the tables. Just hold them up and somebody from the staff will come along and pick those up. And we'll review all of those questions submitted and hopefully we'll get to as many as possible. So with that, on one side of the card, you can ask a question to all the candidates or you can ask for a specific question on the reverse side. If we don't get to those questions and they're for specific candidates, we'll give the candidates the questions and then you can follow up with those individuals as you see fit. So now to the candidates, I'd like to give you guys just a few instructions before we begin. I'd like to remind you that Janelle, seated in front of you, she's our president and CEO. She is going to be our official timekeeper, and she's going to indicate how much time you guys have for each question and when your time is expired. So please stop talking when you see the red flashing light up at the top. For each question, I'm going to indicate which candidate's going to answer first. I'll tell you how long you have to provide your answer, and then in what order you will answer in. So candidates for Assembly Seat A, so whatever Assembly seat you're in, the two of you will answer before we move on to the next group. And then we'll just kind of rotate through all of the candidate seats that way. So for your reference, the questions are also going to appear on the screen, not going to appear on the screen. The questions are going to be read verbally by me. If you need me to repeat a question, I'd be happy to do that, and I think you also have a copy of them in front of you. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to do 1-minute introductions, and we're going to start with Seat A, and this is going to be Mr. McKinley, followed by Mr. Guttenberg. So with that, you can begin.
I want to thank you all for being here today, taking time out of your busy schedule. My name is Kevin McKinley, and I'm running for Borough Assembly because I've always wanted to serve in the community I call home. I've lived in Fairbanks for over 20 years where I own and operate a business. And while I've been knocking on doors, talking to people, 3 things have continually come up. Responsible budgets, safe neighborhoods, and a business-friendly environment. And those are my 3 priorities. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you. My name is David Guttenberg. I've lived in Fairbanks for 52 years. Retired out of the Laborers Union after 25 years, and I spent 16 years in the state legislature representing the west side of town, at times all the way out to the coast. This is a great community. We've grown into an incredible place. We need to make sure that it stays that way and we prosper. We need to make sure that we have adequate infrastructure, that we support the University of Alaska and education for all of our kids, and that we make sure that this is a town and a community that people want to come to and stay. And that's basically everything that I look forward to serving on here, to make sure those values are in place.
Thank you. Ms. Silva from Seat F.
Welcome. My name's Patricia Silva. I've been in Fairbanks for 37 years, married to my wonderful husband for 35. Gave birth at 70 below to my beautiful daughter. I consider myself a sourdough. I lived and worked in the rural Alaska in the 80s. I've served the community in one capacity or another. In 2020, I campaigned with Dan Sullivan as his campaign coordinator. This borough has many tasks to attend to. We must create a balance, and we must do that for our local contractors and volunteers who've been pushed aside and been replaced by growing government. We're going to tighten the budget, and we're going to lower your taxes. Our Constitution and our rights have been destroyed even at our local level. Not been destroyed, they're being destroyed at our local level. I stand for your 1st, 2nd, and 14th amendments. And in order for us to remain free...
Thank you.
Thank you.
60 seconds goes by really fast, doesn't it?
I didn't look up.
No worries.
Sorry.
Ms. Fletcher.
Can't see this.
Thank you, and good afternoon. My name is Savannah Fletcher. I'm a nonprofit attorney here in Fairbanks. I represent low-income families and tribes, and I also serve as a planning commissioner for the borough right now and have been in that position for the past year. And I'm running for assembly because I want to give back to the community now that has already given so much to my fiance and I. We're starting our family here, and I believe I have the skills and the competency and the energy to help make this a place where our family can thrive and to support everyone to thrive here and want to spend their lives here. The principles that will guide my work on the assembly are 3. The first is I want to do the work, put in the research to find great creative solutions for all of us. Secondly, I always have an open ear. I'm eager to listen to all of you, hear from your experiences, and gather your ideas on how we can make this community better. And lastly, My overarching principle and everything I would hope to do on the Assembly is to value everyone in our community and make sure that everyone has a chance to thrive here. Thanks.
Thank you. Moving to seat G, Mr. Roberts.
My name is Lance Roberts. I was born and raised here. I went to UAF, got a few degrees, and I work full-time. I am happily married to a wonderful woman that I rescued from a blue state, and I am blessed. So, as many of you know, I served 6 years already on the Borough Assembly. I did over 100 ordinances and resolution, more than anyone's ever done, because I went there to work. And there's a lot to be done. Most of my ordinances came out of constituents telling me about situations with the code that just didn't work for them. And so I did everything I could to fix those situations. And there's plenty more to do because, well, too much to explain, but there's a lot to do. My priorities are to lower taxes. We need the money back in the people's hands to stimulate the economy, to protect land and property rights. Land issues are a big issue, and to protect the road and fire service areas in their autonomy, which is efficient, very efficient.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to be here to share my thoughts and my hopes for this borough. I'm running for Assembly quite simply because I love this community and I love living in this borough, even this summer with the road construction. My 25-year background as an educator, a counselor, and as a mother has kept me in touch with many of the bright young people of our borough. I want them to stay in Fairbanks. I want them to earn a living here, buy their homes here, start businesses, and remain in Fairbanks. As a property owner, I believe taxpayers must receive a good value and services for their taxes. I'm bullish on Fairbanks. My husband calls it extra tough, like the boots. I'm always saying I love this borough and I love living here. As a government, we must ask in a positive, friendly, forward-thinking way to think about how we can improve, become more business-friendly, and continue to grow. My top 3 priorities are economic development, education, and parks and recreation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have a series of questions that are based on the Chamber's advocacy agenda and also that have been suggested by some of our Chamber members. So for the first question, you'll have 45 seconds to respond, and we're going to begin with seat F, starting with Ms. Fletcher and then Ms. Silva. And then we're going to go to seat G and seat A, and I'll let you know your order. The question, so the Borough Assembly is responsible for approving the borough's budget, setting the mill rate for taxation, and appropriating funds to provide for borough services. Budgeting will be an important part of the office that you are seeking. So aside from your personal finances, can you describe your experience and/or role in managing a budget? Ms. Fletcher, 45 seconds.
Thank you. Managing a budget responsibly is critical. I've had the opportunity to do this multiple times, but one key instance was during my time at Stanford Law School. I helped manage a 6-figure budget for a nonprofit public interest foundation, and I had to determine which grants we would fund, which priorities would best further our mission, and make sure we saved enough money in our budget for future needs and expenses. And with that came lots of planning and prioritization and thoughtfulness to detail that I would bring to my time serving on the borough when managing our budget here. Additionally, in my work as a lawyer, I not only manage people's budgets, but help them determine big life planning, family planning skills with a lot of gravity and importance. I would treat managing our budget with the same gravity and importance as I do with that work. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
Yes. Well, I've had an opportunity to sit on boards and as a director, tasks with reviewing and approving budgets. As an entrepreneur, I've developed and managed my budgets, which required constant view, making necessary changes to keep my business successful. And that is the degree of my budgeting.
Thank you. We're going to move to seat G. Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. While a teacher at Monroe, I created a small business running summer academic camps. I see some of you in the audience whose children I taught there. At Monroe, I was on the development committee and helped with High POW. At Best Homeschool, I was deeply involved in that budget. All of these experiences taught me the key to budget success is very similar to business, getting more customers in the door. You can't keep budgeting with a declining market share. How can we get more housing stock stock on the market to bring in more property taxes. It's housing that's badly needed with the expansion of Eielson. We need to look at a way to grow our tax base. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
So before I got on the Borough Assembly, I spent a couple of years testifying in front of them, and I bought the borough budget myself every year and went over it. And then in 6 years on the Assembly, I was in lots and lots of budget meetings, thousands of hours, and read thousands of pages, and dealt with the borough budgets and the CAFR also. I also paid attention to the school district budgets. I created spreadsheets for both the school district budgets and for the borough budgets till the school district stopped giving out that information. They started hiding information from the public, so I wasn't able to get that. But the borough budget every year, even when I've been off the Assembly, I've been sending that spreadsheet to the Assembly. So I've had a lot of experience with the budget, and it actually takes up the most work of assemblymen, so it's probably the most important attribute.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you. I spent 20 years in the legislature dealing with budgets, 4 as finance staff, 16 as a legislator. I dealt with many departments taking apart and rebuilding their budgets. I spent when I left the legislature, I was chair of Ledge Council, which runs the business of the legislature. I was in charge of the leases, the remodels, the employees, the new construction, everything in my name or my signature. I'm ready to go on budgeting for the borough. I've got lots of experience. I'm ready to walk in and do the job.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
Owning a business for over 30 years, I've gotten to write many, many budgets. I started this business with $72, and with good budgeting and good management, we now have 4 locations throughout the state of Alaska with over 20 employees. I've also had the opportunity, as being a member of a nonprofit, of helping develop a nonprofit's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a reminder, if you have a question for the candidates, please just make sure you hold up your card, and the chamber staff will come around to collect those. So for our next question, we're going to start with seat G, beginning with Mr. Roberts, followed by Ms. Kelly. You're going to have 60 seconds to respond. The Fairbanks North Star Borough has been working to assess the housing needs of the Eielson Air Force Base. The final F-35 housing assessment update and the KC-135 assessments are still underway or need to begin. Through interpretation of these assessments, we understand that there is a gap between what the borough has for vacancy rates and planned incoming personnel. How would you address the current housing shortage and accommodating new community family members? Mr. Roberts, 60 seconds.
So I agree. As everyone knows, we do have housing issues in this town. I mean, we were looking for a new house this year and lost out on 5 bids. I mean, housing is crazy right now. Having said that, the borough doesn't have a lot to do with it, but one thing that it could do to really streamline the procedure, right now you've got huge lines in community planning. They haven't been able to hire enough employees, but we also have too many regulations that are keeping community planning too busy, sometimes for very small little things. And so I plan to address the platting process in a big way and all land issues. I was on the Land Management Commission for 6 years while I was on the Assembly, and we dealt a lot with the different issues. We changed land code in a major way, and we need to address it again and make it smoother so the contractors can be in and out and take care of basic business quicker, so we're not slowing them down. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. The borough with limited powers doesn't have a ton it can do directly. They don't have housing powers. This is where the private industry sector needs to take the lead. But what we do know is that we haven't used all the tools in our basket yet. We can use tax credits, refunds, and other incentives. Those things were recommended in the 2018 study about Eielson's expansion and the need for housing. We should look at that and see where we're at and what else we can do. This ties into the borough's zoning issues. Land use regulations consistent with what is needed to grow the borough should be considered. Developers would then have some predictability for single and multifamily housing. So addressing zoning needs and tax incentives with a common sense approach is a good starting point. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to seat A, Mr. McKinley.
First of all, I'd like to thank the builders for the hard work that they have been doing. It is correct that the borough doesn't have really building powers, but one of the things I would do is get the builders and the military together to see what type of units are needed. We get the state to talk to the borough to see if we could do a land transfer to make more buildable land available. It is correct that the platting and planning process is very cumbersome. If it takes way too long, it can delay a project unnecessarily. And I think that one of the other things that we should look at as far as the military facility zone, I would like to see that expanded throughout the state.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you. You know, some mention of the 2018 study on the housing issues, impacts on Carlson. We have not been proactive enough. Now we're facing a crunch that's coming up right in front of us. Like it's been said, the borough has limited authority and power to deal with this issue, but the chamber is full of the experts that know what they're doing, the realtors and the builders, and sitting down at the table and figuring out what do we need to do ahead of ourselves. What type of housing, multi-housing, single-family housing. One of the problems we have is that a lot of the soldiers don't leave base. We need them to come out into the community, and one of the best ways is having housing for them.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
Thank you for the question. Currently, first of all, I want to say thank you. Our builders have done an excellent job on both Fort Wainwright and on Carlson. Currently, however, we still need about 90 units. Our military does have temporary housing that can be utilized for this need. In addition, next summer we're going to need about 250 additional units built. And this is, on the average, what we build each year. So one of the things we could do is go to the state to see if they have land trade that can be made for usable, buildable lands near the bases. And secondly, tax incentives in the military zone can also be vetted.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you. As someone who bought my first house here 2 years ago, I know firsthand some of the struggles with finding a home. I spoke to a realtor recently who said the turnaround for buying a home right now is 100 days to get it sold. We know that if we better partner with our private sector to have more appraisers in town, to have better access and more abundance in title companies so we can process that more quickly, we can get more homes with people moving into them, make sales go more quickly. Additionally, as far as building new housing, what is within our powers are to do further incentives, like the recent one we passed this past February that incentivizes new construction of energy-efficient homes. How can we build upon that and further incentivize even more construction? We all know the cost of timber has gone up, but I've been told there are hopes it will level out soon, and so I think we can further new homes in this community. But it's going to take a private and public partnership. As you've heard everyone say here today, it's not solely within our powers, but I think utilizing our comprehensive plan, encouraging greater density in multifamily homes can help us move in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question, you're going to have 60 seconds to answer. We're going to start with the candidates in seat A, starting with Mr. Guttenberg, followed by Mr. McKinley. And one of the adopted 2021 priorities of the Fairbanks Chamber is supporting the community in its COVID-19 response and recovery. We are working to advocate for streamlined financial programs and policy initiatives to promote recovery efforts in the community. Many businesses and employees continue to be significantly impacted by the pandemic, leading to staffing and operational challenges, including the supply chains. The Interior Alaska COVID-19 Economic Impact and Recovery Plan outlines a strategy and goals to support the Fairbanks North Star Borough in economic and societal recovery during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you feel businesses most need and or want right now, and how would you address this need? Mr. Guttenberg, 60 seconds.
Thank you. Well, I think businesses looking for stability, and the COVID relief funds can help it with that. We need to apply for those, get those, and get those monies out to the communities and the places, the businesses that applied for them. Holding that money up, in a lot of places it is being held up or it's not being distributed, is important. The impact of those funds to normalize life again is very important. We need to take care of the business that is a distribution of those funds.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
I got off track. Would you read the question, please?
Sure. So it was regarding the COVID-19 response and recovery efforts. What do you feel businesses most need and or want right now, and how would you address this need?
When you talk to a lot of businesses out there, right now, a lot of them are talking about lack of labor. There's not enough people out there to serve the businesses and the customers that come into the door. One of the ideas that I think that we need to look at is the international workers, the J-1 visas. Those workers have not come into the state for the last year. It's really hurt our business. I would like to talk to the congressional delegation and see what we can do about that. I also think that one of the things that's really worked is the Buy Alaska program. I think that that's something that we should look at using and expanding.
Thank you. Seat F, we're going to begin with Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you. I work downtown every single day and have seen businesses over the past year that have unfortunately closed due to the struggles of COVID. But at the same time, I have seen businesses thrive and show their resiliency, and I really think it's a testament to this community at how we've pivoted and been creative during hard times. What I have gathered are kind of 3 things that I think businesses could use the borough's support in right now. First, as was mentioned by Mr. McKinley, is we need more bodies, more employees working. My office has lost staff. I feel like everyone's feeling that crunch. And one thing that the borough can concretely do to assist with that is increase childcare availability so folks can get back to working. And during my time on the Planning Commission, we've already approved multiple daycare facilities, and we've also worked to reduce the bureaucracy to get more daycares licensed and approved at the local level. Secondly, we need more folks coming to stores. We need to ensure that our community stays safe so people can go out shopping safely and also know if road closures are coming up. And lastly, we need more tourism so more people keep coming and bringing business here. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
Okay. When speaking with business owners, basically they're looking for people that just really want to come to work. They're looking for accountability and integrity. However, our administration has created a plan, a recovery plan, suggesting that COVID is the reason that our communities have failed. And truthfully, in my opinion, it's the government that has failed our communities with their stay-at-home policies where they pay people to stay at home. Example, if you have 4 exemptions on your 2020 tax return, you're getting approximately $5,600. In addition to that, if you have more dependencies, you're going to get an additional $1,400. So we need to meet with our congressional delegates to discuss the negative impact that this has had on our current plan.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
Some businesses, especially tourism and restaurants, are still recovering from the impacts of the pandemic. They may need more direct help right now. Other businesses seem to be rebounding and are having a bit better year than 2020, thank goodness. However, with the virus still coming at us and active in our community, we need to know from you, what is it that businesses most need right now? How can we help? We also need to have policies that promote economic recovery more broadly, like property tax breaks for small businesses and economic opportunities for that the borough can create. Continuing to do things that promote economic growth, like excellent schools and trail development, are also critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
So we recognize the labor shortages that the local businesses are having caused by the way government reacted in the last year, the extra money they threw on unemployment to disincentivize labor, and the other extra money. So we just have to deal with that since we can't control them giving out that money. One thing we could control is how we did the CARES money, and we did very poorly at the borough. We were supposed to give out a lot of that money to the businesses. Very little got to businesses. They created a 7-page application that took a lot of arcane accounting information, and a lot of businesses wouldn't even apply because it was just too much. There's got to be a better way. Government doesn't always have to do it poorly. So we need to look at that when we're looking at the next tranches that may come to us. and support businesses with them. I think that's a priority. It's also a priority to cut regulation, but mostly to cut taxes. You got a lot of landlords out there with a lot of empty buildings, and they're still paying taxes on it. We need some tax relief. That money would be working in the economy.
Thank you. We're now going to move into some rapid-fire yes/no questions, and you all have your green and red cards in front of you. For each question, just please hold up your answer, and just hold them up until everyone has answered as well, and then we'll move on to the next one. So a little bit of a warm-up. It's been raining a lot. How many of you own a pair of extra tufts? All right. Okay, so the first question is, have you attended a Borough Assembly meeting within the last year, either in person or remotely? Do you believe more money should be allocated to the Fairbanks North Star Borough school system? Are the waste disposal and recycling needs of the businesses and residents of the borough currently being met?
I missed that question.
It was the recycling needs being met of the businesses and the residents. Okay. Should the borough actively support resource development on the North Slope and elsewhere in Alaska as an economic driver for our region? With all of the work that the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation does for economic community within the borough, do you support the continuation of borough funding to support FEDC? And our last one, as we move into winter, are the snow removal needs of businesses and residents of the borough currently, or will they be met?
Will they, or are they currently?
Well, we don't have snow on the ground yet, so I don't think it's currently being met. But are the snow removal needs of businesses and residents of the borough being met this winter? Or in the past? All right, thank you for those rapid fire questions. We have our next question. You will have 45 seconds to respond, and we're going to begin with Ms. Silva, followed by Ms. Fletcher. So to follow up on the borough budget question, the coronavirus pandemic has reduced revenues for all levels of government, just as it has reduced revenues for most businesses. If you could increase funding in just one area of the borough budget, what would it be? And which part of the budget would you take that money from? If overall spending remains the same, prioritizing one program means obviously reducing another. So 45 seconds, we're going to begin with Ms. Silva.
So having worked for the government, I'm keenly aware of the wastefulness of your tax dollar. Each department's given a budget. They can either use it or lose it. I've witnessed frivolous spending, just my experience, in order to keep from losing their projected budget allocations. So I would look carefully at their needs, I would provide for them, and where necessary or available, I would move monies.
Thank you. Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you. To give a single concrete example of a place that I would like to invest more funds in our community, that's in cleaning up burned down and abandoned properties. We all know the Polaris building as an icon of something that's become a source that we'd like to clean up and convert that into rather a profitable money-making place that brings vibrancy to downtown, perhaps more housing for elders as well. And additionally, when I drive down the road in other parts of Fairbanks, I see other burnt and abandoned buildings that don't reflect our values and love for our community. So by enforcing that these properties be cleaned up and actually ensuring that their property taxes are being paid, I could see that budget balancing out easily with our code enforcement officer, ensuring that that gets cleaned up and really listens to the community's demands that we have a clean, safe Fairbanks. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
Wasn't ready for that. Thought it was in the next order. Okay, so could you repeat the question?
Sure. If you could increase funding in just one area of the borough budget, what would it be? Which part of the budget would you take that money from? And if overall spending remains the same, prioritizing that would mean taking from another.
Sure. So I definitely would not increase the borough budget. I commit to decreasing the borough budget. I've kept that spreadsheet that I send the assembly every year. The budget's always been going up. There was only 1 year when it very slightly decreased, and the mill rate very slightly decreased. That was actually the only year I voted for a budget, because it's gone way past the cost of living, the increases, even with the tax cap. It's gone past the cost of living. We keep adding. The last 2 years, we added like 5 or 6 employees for the last 2 years. And this is not the time to be doing that when all the money from the state is being cut down, when everybody else is having to cut their budget. Government should be matching what families in the community have to do. One thing you could decrease is bus lines that are serving less than 10 people. They cost a lot of money.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
A difficult question, but I think facilities maintenance is critical. We need to protect our investments. I applaud those members of the Assembly and Mayor Ward who advocated for the Facilities Maintenance Reserve Fund and the Capital Improvement Project, the KIP. Schools and buildings like Mary Sy and the Civic Center are now addressed in a thoughtful and systematic way. To pay for it, I support gaining efficiencies and improving processes. Some areas could be automated and some services done more efficiently. The best way would be to get more land from our borough put out into the private sector and onto the tax rolls. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
After reviewing the budget, there are no areas that I believe I would increase. If we did have any savings from efficiencies, I would direct that money to the energy appliance exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you. Something that I've been working on a long time. I would support the mayor's efforts to find ways to increase broadband access for all of Fairbanks. It touches all the priorities for the chamber: economic development, education, energy, military, transportation, infrastructure. If you live in Fairbanks, you know that there is a broadband problem here. We need to increase it, public-private sector agreements to get coming together, increasing the broadband access that we have, because it's not adequate. We can't grow the borough if people don't have broadband access.
Thank you. Our next question will require a 60 seconds response, and we're going to begin with Ms. Kelly, followed by Mr. Roberts. The Fairbanks North Star Borough's stated vision for the comprehensive economic development strategy is to improve borough residents' quality of life and standard of living by developing goals, establishing objectives, and implementing strategies that sustain, enhance, or increase economic and social opportunities for local residents. This plan contains 3 main community priorities surrounding energy costs, support of our military bases, and supporting a larger market in the borough. What ideas and initiatives do you believe would help the borough complete these objectives? 60 seconds, Ms. Kelly.
The borough just recently started updating this strategy, known as the SEDS. They aren't that far into the process right now, and having input from the members of the chamber and local businesses is critical. We need to envision what tourism is going to look like in a post-COVID world. What opportunities are out there that we could capitalize on now? For example, we have 3 excellent trail systems in the borough that, with a little modification, could all tie together and create a trail that goes from the east side of town to the west side of town, similar to what they have called the Tour of Anchorage. These folks stay in hotels, eat in restaurants, buy sports equipment, rent cars, buy souvenirs. They tell their friends what a great place Fairbanks is to visit. This is a great opportunity for our borough. The previous SEDS identified winter tourism as the fastest growing sector of the visitor industry in the state. One thing we have here in Fairbanks is a lot of snow and a lot of winter. Let's capitalize on that.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
So I worked with the past SEDS that was done, and I'm certainly going to follow closely when the new SEDS comes out. I voted against it the last time because it has a lot of stuff in it that the borough has no business being in. We're a second-class borough, and we're giving certain powers by the people, and there's a lot of places we don't belong. The people who make business successful are the businessmen. Government doesn't just come up and make business successful. The best thing they can do is enforce a just and equitable system, enforce the property rights, and stay out of the way. Make their regulations that they do have to have work. Make them efficient. businessmen, just like, look at all the aurora viewing. Government didn't create that. People just got out and started doing that, and it just boomed. So there's a lot the borough can do to get out of the way, and I'm going to support the businesses and the borough facilitating, not implementing. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you. Well, the SEDS is an order, which are state organizations around the state, Alaska Economic Development Zones. And I have always been concerned in Juneau watching other orders come in with very strategic, surgical application and come in and get and become very successful on money they're taking out of Juneau. Fairbanks needs to be doing that more succinctly and better than they have been doing it. You know, it's a policy that needs to be implemented. There's a lot of things we can do here. I think our things for Northern Lights and winter tourism are phenomenal here. We just need to do a better job on getting it done.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
One of the things that I mentioned earlier is I do think the Buy Alaskan, getting Alaskans to buy Alaskans products instead of making Amazon grow rich from this pandemic. I do think that we should encourage the mayor to make the whole borough a military facility zone. I think that this would encourage growth. I think that it would really help our economy, and I think that it would help the area, all of the areas of the borough. I think that also is streamlining our processes is important. Making it to where businesses that want to get things done, they can get done, and it doesn't take a whole season just to get paperwork done. Thank you.
Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you. When the SEDS was last developed 5 years ago, things looked really different on the ground. We've had an increase in our population through the growth at Eielson. COVID has hit our community. We have a higher cost of building new homes. And there's just a heightened awareness, as Mr. Guttenberg raised earlier, of the need for broadband and how critical that is for businesses. So what can the borough do within its powers and role to help support these changes and make business more successful? I think one thing we can do is zoning changes so there's more business and multifamily districts and people can more easily access our local stores instead of turning to those online retailers, and coordinating with businesses when we have new road construction projects coming up. I know certain restaurants opened up in downtown only to have roads become near inaccessible to reach, and it's really hurt those businesses. How can we partner and give better heads up so that they're not disproportionately impacted? Additionally, how can we incentivize new housing construction and bring in that great labor, and also partner with private and city to increase broadband access? Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
So all of these ideas are great considerations. So I think we need to create incentive programs in order to change that mentality of stay home and be paid to stay home. I think we need to we have to realize that this additional funding at the level that has been given is not sustainable. I think we should create incentive and training programs that can be put into place immediately, because there will come a time when the government will no longer, excuse me, be able to offer subsistence.
Thank you. And we are definitely going to have time for audience questions. So if you have an audience question, please raise that up, or you can bring it up to the table and drop it in the basket with Suzanne here. But just hold them up so staff can find those. Our next question is also going to be a 60-second answer. We're going to begin with Mr. McKinley, followed by Mr. Guttenberg, and work our way down the line. $18.8 million in direct aid to the Fairbanks North Star Borough was allocated by the American Rescue Plan Act in June of 2021. The Borough Assembly requested the first allocation of $2 million shortly after this. The rest of the money must be spent by 2026. Correct use of these funds include A, a response to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19 or its negative economic impacts. B, provide premium paid eligible essential workers. C, provide government services to the extent of reduction in revenue due to the emergency. And finally, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. And that is not a pop quiz question. Those are the requirements within there. Our question for you is, what do you believe has worked regarding the distributions of these monies in the borough? What do you think has not worked? And where do you see continuing need for current or next year's allocations? 60 seconds, big question, Mr. McKinley.
Thank you for the question. During that unprecedented time, we were able to get money out to people that needed it. I think that's the best thing that we could have done. There are some challenges to that there was claims that it was slow, the procedures were cumbersome. But I do think that after going through this once, hopefully we never have to go through it again, but if we do, we know how to do it quicker and more efficient. I do think that one of the areas that we can allocate that money to is businesses. I think businesses, some of them didn't hear about this soon enough and missed out on the opportunity. And I'd also like to see that possibly targeted to where the businesses that got most impacted either got moved ahead of the line or considered first, tourism, service industries, things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you. Well, I think one of the top priorities should be covering essential workers from doctors in the hospitals and RNs to service area, fire and ambulance service. We need to make sure that those guys are covered, that they can continue to do the life safety things that we all expect government to do for us. We need to make sure that they're the least impacted, even though they're the most hardest hit in many cases. We need to make sure that with those monies that we do things that are also sustainable. I think the child care issue that was brought up earlier is very important. We need to make sure that people can get to work, not just during the COVID, but at all times so that they have places to take child care. It's a shortage everywhere. And being efficient and using the money well. I mean, infrastructure and projects are nice, but we need to make sure that the impacts go to businesses as well that can sustain the economy.
Thank you, Ms. Silva.
So the borough had a program that allowed businesses to recoup from some of their losses during the pandemic. The program ran out of money, I believe, before a majority of the businesses realized that there was money that existed. Not to forget the 7-page document you had to fill out in order to get the money. But the program, like I said, ran out of money. But some businesses kept their doors open, and they were very grateful. With the potential of shutting down businesses and our economy again during this flu season, this is a good time for us to review the program, to make any changes necessary so that we can help even more people.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you. As Ms. Silva mentioned, the initial distribution of ARPA funds may not have been the most efficient or effective, but not to dwell on that, but rather be forward-looking. I've been sitting in on the Assembly's working sessions to talk about how we will spend the new ARPA funds, and I believe a vote for that is coming up this September. So to the degree that we're able to just help implement and make sure those projects come through effectively, the priorities from that list that the Assembly is currently considering that I really appreciate and focus on are a combination of infrastructure. Working on the sewer and water systems for Pearl Creek Elementary in the Belaine area, for example, will be a benefit to the school, but also to the houses in that community. Additionally, upgrades to Pioneer Park and making that a space that stays thriving and active for businesses to host events, for tourists to come visit for years to come is something I highly value. And thirdly, really looking towards the future, as we've talked about, the need for broadband. Currently, they're proposing $500,000 going towards a feasibility study in partnership with the city. I think that's really smart planning for our future to make sure we can all have work here for years to come. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
So, we already mentioned about the CARES money. The ARPA money, we're still trying to spend the first of it. That was what was just referenced. We haven't actually put that out. And the way it's built now, there is no money for businesses being allocated. The money is going for borough projects and some other infrastructure stuff. They're doing a $1 million broadband study. But we have many companies in Alaska working with broadband and communications. Why is the borough trying to get involved? We didn't give it those powers. They don't have the power of a communications utility. So I think there's some real problems with the way that money is being spent. And if you think businesses should be allocated some of that money, you need to contact your current assembly members. You need to contact the mayor because the vote's coming up soon. And right now, it's just all going to increase the government. So please pay attention. Thank you.
Ms. Kelly.
Well, as we've heard, the borough hasn't distributed the last rounds of ARPA funds yet. The first go-around did focus on small businesses, and while that was good, we've all heard that that was a difficult process and was very cumbersome. We need to do better as a borough. My understanding is the Assembly has identified 16 projects and will be looking at that list and perhaps voting on it at the next meeting, September 19th. So it behooves all members here and small businesses to take a look at that list and see if you support those projects and if there's more that can be added. The list should include projects and investments that make the borough a more attractive place for businesses and their employees. We are all looking for a good quality of life. Fairbanks competes with other communities as a place to live, and people do vote with their feet. So we need to take the long view and continue to improve the quality of living here in Fairbanks. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move into our audience submitted questions at this point. So this is going to be for all candidates, and we are going to begin, we're just going to go right down the line this way, starting with Mr. Guttenberg. You'll have 30 seconds to answer. As a Borough Assembly member, how do you plan to attract industry and opportunities for our residents? Is this part of your duties as a Borough Assembly member?
Thank you. I missed part of it, but I think I got the gist of it. Well, I think one of the most important things that I have heard over the many years listening to business is they want stability. They want economic development. They want infrastructure in place. Those are the things that government does do. You know, we do roads, we do highways, we do bridges, the railroad, and we need to be making sure that we have broadband. You know, the military is coming in, a lot of their people could be living off base. The generals have said they need to have access to broadband. We need to make sure that that's there for them, whether it's private-public partnerships or that the public sector just coming, or the private sector just coming in and do it themselves. We need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place, that business can come in and expand. That's the one role of government that I think is critical.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
It is mentioned that public and private partnerships are important. I do think that one of the things that we can do to attract businesses up here is create an environment that people want to live in. We see a lot of people that move up here and end up moving out rather quickly. Energy, whether it's energy prices, whether it's education, whether it's cost of living. The borough can't do a lot about that, but what the borough can do, as mentioned before, is infrastructure. And that's where I think we should concentrate on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fletcher.
Thanks. I think it's certainly the responsibility as an assembly member to make sure we're creating a community where people want to come live and stay here and raise families and do business. And so to the degree that we have the powers to do that, the things I would try to focus on are, first, funding and having great, strong public schools. That's how people can raise families, kids that have good training programs, whether it's through middle college or pre-professional like Hutch. And then you can have union jobs, get a college education at UAF, stay here, raise a family, and just keep this community strong for years to come. I believe that's critical. Additionally, the public services that make living here fun and inviting for no matter what kind of lifestyle you are. Military base members may be shocked when they first move to Fairbanks, but if we have more Foo Fighters concerts at the Carlson Center or more trails and parks for people to enjoy, they will stay here for years to come and keep doing business within our community. So I plan to support that on Assembly.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
So it's pretty exciting living in Fairbanks. Like I said, I came up here 37 years ago, curious as a cat, intentionally. I'm still here. I get out and I enjoy all of our parks, all of our hiking, snow machining, you name it, I do it. Went Chitina fishing recently. But I do believe that, I believe in limited government, but effective government. And I think that there's definitely been an overreach. I believe that our monies aren't spent properly. I'm going to reflect on the Mary Sy project. The Mary Sy project is something that we definitely want to offer our community, but we spent $6 million for a 2-year Band-Aid, and in the event that it comes back around, which it will, we need to find a permanent fix on projects of that scale. So Whether I touched right on this question or not, I find that's a very important issue that we need to address, because my position on taxes and government are even more necessary this year because of limiting state funds.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
Well, I agree with a lot of what was brought up here, but I also think that the emphasis on schools is really important, not just for people that have children. The military, the medical fields, the UAF, our hospital leaders, when they're trying to recruit professionals to this town, that is what they look at. What are the schools like? Is this a place I want to bring my family and stay? So schools are critical. And along with that, also having this town moving forward with economic development, so this is a good place and a fun place to live and bring your family and want to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
So I'm certainly opposed to the general concept of public-private partnerships where the government puts a lot of money in to support a single business, and we've seen examples like that. I was talking to a constituent yesterday about one. It's not really appropriate. It also makes it less efficient because businessmen can do the job better. But a real example, you can see this last year, is when they converted the Carlson Center, took it off of the private contractor. We're now spending an extra, I believe the last number, it was like $750,000. They hired like 5 employees. That's going to increase in the years to come, and they are directly competing against the private sector. That is inappropriate. You know, we need more businesses and less government competing against them. So as far as industry goes, which was the word in the question, industry depends on cheap power. Anything that you call industrial is going to come back to getting cheap power. So that involves natural gas. We have a gas utility that so far hasn't succeeded, but there's people on that board trying hard to make it work, and I hope that they do, because that's what's going to change things and give us more resource development and other industry.
Thank you. Our next audience question will be a 45-second response. We're going to begin with Mr. Roberts, followed by Ms. Kelly. Please describe a time when you held a leadership position in your community.
Okay, so I served 2 terms on the Borough Assembly, and it is a leadership position, but I want to make sure everyone understands. I put a letter to the editor in the paper today directly addressing that, because somebody had printed a lie about me that I thought getting the assembly meant having authority over people. I don't believe the assembly, the mayor, the legislature, the governor, the Congress, or the president has authority over you. We have a republic, and it's ruled by law. Now, the assembly makes those laws. We're a legislative body, and those laws that are constitutionally conforming, those have authority, but an assemblyman does not have authority. So that was a leadership position, and I did my best to make laws to help my constituents and to work on trimming the budget every single year and for doing good solutions to solve problems.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
I've served the last 12 years as a volunteer for the Nordic Ski Club of Fairbanks. In that time, I was on the board for the competitive side of it and was in charge of raising all the funds for that and keeping the coaches to a salary that they could actually live and thrive here in Fairbanks. I've been a teacher, which is a leader in the position, and also I've worked in homeschool, where I've been working as a leader to help kids when the schools were all shut down last year. Our population at the school district, at the homeschool, I think it tripled, and so trying to help them pick out the materials they needed while staying in the school district really helped our funds and kept the school district afloat. Thank you.
Mr. McKinley.
I'm a member of Shriners International. Here it's Alaska Shrine. I was what they call a potentate, which is a very fancy word for saying chief executive officer. I was in charge of 600 Shriners throughout the state and 300 Shrine children. Part of my job was to schedule hospital visits for all of those children. If you want to have a busy day, try to get 100 children through a hospital office before noon. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you. Well, I think I described my leadership skills as reluctant. I found myself in front of the room reluctantly many times. Starting in the late 80s, I was chair of the Interior Democrats for 6 years. Then I was chair of the Alaska Democratic Party for 2. Then I was leadership roles in the legislature, or the minority leader for a while, and whip. And like I said, I was chosen by the legislature to be the chair of all their business, as Ledge Council chair.
Thank you. Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you. I've held many leadership positions in my time. A few highlights include when I was president of the Stanford Public Interest Law Foundation, which I've mentioned previously today, managing a 6-figure budget and prioritizing public interest goals that we could support with our grant funds, and also orchestrating a huge auction every year to continue raising those funds. Additionally, I've served as lead of pro bono for different environmental causes and working with different public interest groups on prioritizing regulations that make sense for those communities and really address their needs, and listening to those that live there. Further, here in town, and something I care a lot about, has been my leadership as a volleyball coach. I've coached at Monroe, I've coached at Hutch, and I've also spent time as a club coach for high school volleyball girls. And it's been a great chance to be a mentor and grow new leaders for our community.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
So having had an opportunity to live in this state for, like I said, 37 years, Fairbanks plus, I've had an opportunity, most recently, 2020, working with Dan Sullivan as his campaign coordinator. It did require a lot of planning, scheduling, working with the community, managing budgets, managing people, and it was quite delightful being able to work with the community and see everyone come together for a greater cause. And I feel like it's taught me a lot, helped me to actually prepare myself for this borough seat that I look forward to serving you in. But I think that was just an exceptional opportunity.
Thank you. Our next question from the audience will have a 60-second response, and we are going to begin with Mr. Guttenberg. And the question is, so the Carlson Center has been in the news quite a bit lately. Explain your position on the ongoing Carlson Center management program changes that are leading to a community center location.
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. So the Carlson Center has been in the news quite a bit with the management changes. Can you explain your position on that change and how it's leading to a new community-driven center?
Thank you. I didn't hear the Carlson Center in the beginning, so I was kind of nebulous after that. I think I've been around a long time watching the Carlson Center being built and being developed, and I think I've always felt that it fell short as far as a community function. And I think restructuring it into something that serves the community more than just what it has been would be a great benefit to all of us. I mean, I think it's supposed to be a community center, and I think it needs to be restructured into that.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
I have to admit, I'm very curious about it becoming a community center and how it could benefit the community. But I'm also worried about the cost of it and what that does to budgeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fletcher.
I am so pleased with the developments at the Carlson Center because I feel like it's one of those times when folks really got to provide input. I don't know how many of you visited the website when they asked for people's feedback and priorities for the Carlson Center, but I've spoken to folks in their 20s, folks in their 50s and 60s, all ages that got to participate in that survey and feel like their priorities are being heard for the community. And to now have a space where we can gather and have so many more community events, I think is critical. The one thing that I do see as a downside, in speaking with Explore Fairbanks and realizing that has been a really vital convention center space, so we'll have to get creative in envisioning new places to host those events, and I'm ready to do that work and find new places and make them available. But in the meantime, like I said before, improving quality of life here means providing facilities like the Carlson Center that folks can use on the darkest days of winter, no matter your age, no matter your abilities, and I really think the direction we're going is a good one.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
So it's always wonderful when we think outside the box and try to figure out how we can best accommodate our communities. Change is good. I look forward to seeing the development and learning more about it. I wish I had more information that I could share with you, but I don't. So I'm looking forward to learning more about this project.
Sorry, doing side business over here. Ms. Kelly.
Well, what we've seen is privatization of the Carlson Center hasn't worked so far, so I think it's a good idea to try something new. We do need a community center here in Fairbanks. We're looking at partnerships with UAF, and we're also looking at partnerships with the Soccer Youth League. And these are all things that will help improve our quality of life here. I think some of us in the room had children or may have gone themselves to the Foo Fighter concert, and that was a wonderful event and was really well done. And it shows that the Carlson Center can compete and do a really great job for our community.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
So originally, the Carlson Center was run by the borough, and it cost so much, it was doing so poorly, that they went to a private contractor system, which worked very well. It was still being subsidized somewhere a little south of $1 million. Now we're up to about $2 million because the borough's taking it back over. So, and it's going to go up because they're just getting started, so there's more to be done, and a lot of capital money's being spent on it to make the conversion. So I think there's a big issue when government takes over something that can be run by a private contractor, but they're definitely not even handling it right. When you look at, I want to bring up that Foo Fighters concert, they ask questions. Now, can you imagine if to go to that, you had to tell them, did you have a colonoscopy and you have to have a card to prove it? Or did you use, I had a friend whose wife just had breast cancer, and instead of getting radiation therapy, she got surgery. What if they say, oh, well, you've got to get radiation therapy? What if they make that medical decision for you? Letting them demand vaccines is medical racism, medical discrimination, and the borough has no right to let people do that in their properties.
Thank you. Okay, so our final, we've had a lot of questions submitted on the topic of zoning. So the first question is going to be a yes, no, so whip out your handy green and red cards. The question is, do you favor bringing the city of Fairbanks back into having a say in zoning decisions? Yes or no? Do you favor bringing the city of Fairbanks back into having a say in zoning decisions? Yes or no? Okay. And our final audience question, it's kind of a long one, so bear with me.
Yes, no?
Nope, this is going to be a 30-second response. In reference to the Borough Code for Planning and Zoning, what is your position relative to the borough's current attention to the enforcement of zoning of existing codes, and whether or not the borough is adequately staffed and equipped to enforce codes that are presently on the books pertaining to junkyard properties? I'll read that one more time.
Yes.
In reference to the Borough Code for Planning and Zoning, what is your position relative to the borough's current attention to the enforcement of zoning of the existing codes, and whether or not the borough is adequately staffed and equipped to enforce those codes that are currently on the books pertaining to junkyard properties? 30 seconds to respond, and we are going to begin with Ms. Silva.
You know, that's a real tough one, because when you talk about private property, you want to give people an opportunity to make decisions for their own property. At the same time, when their property is kind of merging into yours, and it makes it difficult because then you have tug of wars. So my stand on that is unclear. I mean, I don't really have a clear understanding of how I would approach that just yet, but I think it definitely needs to be addressed. And with our borough, with our communities, and I'm not sure exactly how to approach that.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher.
But I will.
Really grateful for that question from the audience. This has been coming up as a huge issue at Planning Commission meetings, as well as public testimony at Assembly meetings. Folks are dissatisfied on multiple fronts. Quickly, because we don't have much time, code enforcement. We have one code enforcement officer. We're told at many of our Planning Commission meetings, already have a backlog of 500 projects to enforce. Our borough is not enforcing our codes. If anything, it's the banks who are not giving mortgages to folks with illegal lots trying to sell their homes. I want to fix that once on the Assembly. Secondly, with junkyard lots, again, we got to address what are our priorities in code enforcement, and I will look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
Right, so the planning department has one code enforcer. Junkyards are tough. The real problem is the definitions, and I think those definitely have to be looked at. You've got a huge range of what you might call it. You have people with the trash that you could walk through like walls to their door, just trash. But then you have people with a lot of valuable assets sitting around. One thing I do believe is that dealing with road service areas, they should be able to keep them out of the road easements. When it starts overflowing into other properties of the road easements, you've gone too far.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
This is an issue on a lot of people's minds right now. Balancing property rights are difficult, both the rights of the person who owns the property and then also being the target of the person who has the junkyard. I think we need a good, consistent process, and that's very important. As an assembly member, I'd like to get all the facts. I'd like to see how we compare to a borough like Matsu, which is similar. Like, how many code enforcers do they have? I think we'd find they have a lot more than we do. So let's roll up our sleeves, let's get to work, let's do this in a fair, consistent manner.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
I do think that we're understaffed. The definition between junkyards and junk needs to be better defined. There's some places out there that are legitimate junkyards where they're having cars and parts. And then, like it was said before, that you see yards with washing machines and trash in them. With being understaffed, we're not taking care of the code enforcement. I think that's something we need to do, and I do think that we need to look at zoning.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Well, one man's treasure is another man's junk, right? That's the problem we have. I think that Fairbanks has a proud history of making sure we have the resources we need in our backyard to do whatever we want to do. I think there's a clear opinion on here that needs to be, there are some problems everywhere on this, and they need to be cleared up. And part of the hardest part of that is the definition and making sure we have people to handle the problem, because clearly we don't have enough. But if you start talking about burned and abandoned property, that becomes another issue that we need to deal with, because that's driving down a lot of property values for a lot of people, and they're concerned also.
Thank you. And so finally today, to conclude our forum, we're going to give each of you some time to make some closing remarks. Each of you will have 60 seconds to do that, and we are going to begin with Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. I'm running for assembly because I want the borough to remain a vibrant place for families to live, to work, and raise a family. This borough has offered me so many unique experiences in the 30 years I've been here. I've run the Equinox with my family. My husband has run the Yukon Quest. My son has participated in the Arctic Winter Games. I've sang in the gospel choir for the Summer Fine Arts Festival. We have so many great things that we do so well in this community, and many of you in the room are responsible for that. Our son was offered a full ride to UAF, going through our schools. He got an academic and an athletic scholarship and just graduated in May, debt-free, and he wants to start a business here in Fairbanks. I believe we must keep moving forward with a vision toward improvement. The Fairbanks North Star Borough is a fantastic place to live, to work, and raise a family. I want to keep it that way.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
So first I want to address some yes/no questions. First, the one the chamber should never ask again, because they asked it last year too, is snow removal in the borough. So the state does snow removal on the major roads. The city does snow removal in the city. The borough only has snow removal in the road service areas, which do not cover every place. And then those independent road service areas, the borough just handles the money for. They have contractors that come out and do snow plowing. And then there's a lot of people who just plow their own outside of road service areas. So on the recycling question, the recycling was implemented. We are not making the money they thought we would, not getting the recycling they thought we would, and we're subsidizing it still. So that it means it's adding to your tax burden what we're doing with recycling. That needs to be looked at. Finally, I guess I'm just going to say my priorities are going to be to lower taxes, to protect all your rights, including your property rights. Every freedom you've got needs to be protected by the borough with the powers that it has within those powers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Guttenberg.
Thank you, and thank the Chamber for having us here. This is one of the forums that we have. I want to talk about veterans. Talk about Alaska veterans. We have a high percentage of veterans in Fairbanks and Alaska. And in 2006, I sponsored legislation to create a veterans cemetery here in Fairbanks. We allocated millions of dollars, which are reimbursable by the federal government for a cemetery. Governor Walker had a groundbreaking ceremony on the land for the cemetery, and then Governor Dunleavy zeroed out the money and basically put it on hold or put it on the back burner. I'm not sure if he's completely killed it. But we need to be advocating for the people in this town, the veterans in this town who decided to live here and make this place their home. We need to give them a final resting place that they want, and that's the source of my legislation when I started this argument, is veterans wanted to be laid to rest here. As a member of the Borough Assembly, I would be advocating that the governor reinstates that program and we move forward on it.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley.
I was knocking on doors the other day campaigning. I walked up to this door, and this lady seen me coming. And before I knocked on the door, she quickly opened it up, and she said, "You have 10 seconds to tell me why I should vote for you." And I told her that I want the job more than anybody, and that I care about my community, and I care about the people in it. So when you walk into that booth, think of Kevin McKinley. I want to make the borough work for you. So on October 5th, remember to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you. I think it's important. I appreciate Mr. Roberts nodding to some of the nuance of the yes-no questions. And many times I raised both with kind of a frustrated look on my face because these aren't black and white questions with easy answers. They require thoughtfulness and time and listening to the experts and professionals in the room. I'm ready and able to do that work, and I'm so eager to do it for Fairbanks. I want to listen to all of your experiences. What can I do for you to make it a better experience for your business, for your family, for your friends, for this whole community? And I believe I have the experience, the competence, the patience, and really the energy to do this well. So please vote for Savannah Fletcher this October 5th. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Silva.
Having lived in Fairbanks for 37 plus years, I feel like I have a very strong understanding of what we need in our community. I know the Borough Assembly has failed us for more than 10 years, more than a decade. It's time to take back the majority. On October 5th, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to either vote for the person or you're going to vote for the platform. I appreciate and respect Ms. Fletcher and her ideas that she's brought to the table today. But our differences are that I will protect your tax cap. She will not. I will shrink government spending and growth. She will not. I will lower taxes. She will not. I will help contractors to get back to work on a level playing field. She will not. I will vote to protect your dividend, your PFD. She will not. I will vote against a state income tax. She will not. Ms. Fletcher comes to us with critical race theory and Black Lives Matters for your school, and I will not.
Thank you.
Excuse me, moderator. Do I have a chance to just respond since I think
We're not doing any back and forth responses.
Fair enough. Thank you.
We probably would be here until next election cycle if we did that. With that, I would say I think that it is very hard to open yourselves up for criticism in running for public office. I commend all of you for putting your name forward, running on campaigns, knocking on doors, taking time away from your families and your businesses and jobs. So thank you to all of you for being here today. We greatly appreciate that. I hope that the audience takes what you learned today and is able to cast an educated vote on October the 5th. We do have a couple of other political forums scheduled. Those are on your tables, I believe. And if you don't receive the Chamber's newsletter, you can contact any of the Chamber staff members. With that, I'd also just like to plug the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce. One of the things that we do is advocate for things to happen in our community that are good for business. If you are not a member of the Education Committee or the Military Affairs or Natural Resources, Energy, Transportation, that is one way to get involved without having to put your name out there and knock on doors and run campaigns, but it is a way to make change. So if you are interested in serving on any of those committees, you can contact Suzanne here or Janelle, any of the chamber staff members, and we'd love to welcome you into those groups. So one more closing comment from me before we give our candidates a round of applause. You may have noticed that we are trying to get back to in-person luncheons. It has been a little bit of a challenge, as we've heard. There's lots of staffing issues throughout the borough, but we are pleased to announce that this chamber staff has been working really hard behind the scenes to try to find us a permanent location for the rest of 2021's luncheons. So starting on September 15th, which will actually feature the candidates running for borough mayor, that lunch will be held at the event center, as will all of the rest of the lunches for 2021. So we are pleased that we are able to get back to in-person lunches, and I know it's been a challenge for the staff to kind of juggle between in-person, hybrid, online, remote, but this is also being recorded, I believe, correct? So if you want to hear another answer, you can watch it back on the Chamber's page. And with that, please join me in a final round of applause for our candidates. Thank you.